ask you guys a question. How many of you have ever seen this book? This book here? Yeah, awesome, awesome, right? I'm going to say this. If you haven't read this, this is required reading for every new starter at HALSA. Required reading. Required reading. And the reason it's required reading is we take someone who knows nothing about chiropractic a lot of the times, and we get them from 0 to 8 fast. 0 to 8 fast. Understanding the principles of chiropractic and how we can change and help people's lives. You know, isn't that the point? How many of you want to help people? How many of you want to heal people? Yeah, awesome, right? So just your understanding of the thing that we do makes such a huge difference, and its research-based is important for our profession and our certainty levels. How many of you agree? Give me a wave. Give me a wave. How many of you guys agree? Awesome. So I highly recommend this book. And now we're very privileged. I know you guys have been listening to this bald guy for too long, and now you're ready for real the brains of the operation to come in. But I'll say this is how many of you heard Heidi speak before? Awesome, awesome. I tell you, the only thing, there are a couple of things I'll tell you about Heidi is I've been for meals with Heidi, and we've had a good time. And we got on a Facebook chat the other day, and we chatted way longer than we were supposed to chat. We were just chatting about just life, and she's just a wonderful person. And every time I spend time with her, one of the things that's interesting about Heidi is that she encompasses what I believe is the secret to a successful chiropractor. She's got great energy. If you spend time with her, you know she cares. And then she's got certainty because she's doing the work. And I think anyone I've got on my stage today encompasses those things in some way, shape, or form. So, ladies and gentlemen, get your pen and paper out. Get your pen and paper out. Give me a little wave. Get excited. Get excited. Make some movement. And please unmute yourself. And welcome to stage, Heidi Orbeck!
Hello, guys. Hello. Oh, it's so lovely to see your faces. Normally, I don't get to see anybody. This is awesome.
Hey. Hi, Heidi. How are you?
Hey, Paul. I'm really good, Ryan. I'm really, really good. Yeah,
awesome.
No, I'm so excited about this. I actually have electricity tonight, which I'm in this morning, which is really wonderful.
Oh, my word, thank goodness. So for those of you who don't know, in New Zealand right now, what time is it there? It's like 5:30 in the morning or something.
Yes, it's 5:30. It's an ungodly hour.
So how many of you are grateful for Heidi giving up so early so she can tell us this amazing information? Awesome. So Heidi, when we were trying to make the timings work, because we have a time limit in this venue, and I said to Heidi very, very kindly, I said, Heidi, please, I would love you to come. And she's like, Ryan, I don't speak before 9. I'm like, well, actually, I kind of need you at like 5:30 in the morning. And she's like, fine, I'll have some coffee, I'll do it. And she's on purpose, and she's here for us. So, Heidi, I know you got some awesome stuff to share with us today. Heidi, the stage is yours. If you need me, just shout. Everyone take pens and papers out, get ready, and we've got some cool stuff to go through. So go for it, Heidi.
Right, I'm on, and I've been looking forward to this. The reason that I did say that I would get up at 5:30, it's only because it's Ryan. I would do the same for the UCA as well. And the reason that I'm so grateful to Ryan Rieder and the UCA and HALSA, because of the donations that you guys gave to the stroke project that we did. I don't think people quite realize that if it wasn't for you guys, we wouldn't have been able to do this research project in the stroke victims that we have done.
Wow.
And so it's so cool because it's resulted in so far 3 different publications in really good high-end journals. The big donation, the only reason that we actually were able to go full stop was because of the UCA. So if you're a UCA member as well as a HALSA member, and you made a donation back a few years back, I cannot thank you enough. Like we couldn't have gone there if it wasn't for this. What was so cool to come out of that was that first stroke study when we were in Pakistan, and showed that a 65% increase in strength from a single session of chiropractic adjustments, adjusting subluxations, resulted in on average a 65% increase in strength. It still to this day gives me goosebumps to think about it, because this was the first time we were actually looking at brains, because we'd seen changes in brains, right, for many, many years up until now, but to see it in a population that has actually lost their cortical ability to activate their muscles is just mind-boggling, right? And again, like, I don't want you to underestimate the donation that HELSA did. And there were quite a few other little groups that did as well. I'm saying little, you know, I know you're big, but smaller donations, because the UCA had that big funding that came in, but we had Calgian gave some money, the Patient Maven gave some money, the Scottish Chiropractic Association. So again, if you're part of the Scottish Chiropractic Association, they put some money into it. Rubicon Group put some money into it. And because of all of that, we actually collected about 7 sets of data while we were there. So far we've published 3 papers from that one single session. And again, what was so cool about it is it built on those previous studies that we had done, where we'd looked at normal students and got a 16% increase in strength. And then it was because of our collaborators. We were collaborating with the world leaders in these techniques that we were using, because what it was showing us was that it was the drive from the brain to the muscle that was increasing so dramatically, not spinal cord changes. And of course, to me, that was just like, whoa, it's confirming that it's a brain model. We're changing the brain when we're adjusting subluxations. And it was this professor that I was working with that suggested, oh, Heidi, if you can do this in normal people, you should see if you can do it in sports people. So we did. So we did it in these Olympic athletes. Like, we literally got hold of a group of taekwondo athletes, and they'd been Olympic level taekwondo athletes, still highly trained machines, and they still got an over 6% increase in strength, which for a highly trained Olympic athlete, 6% increase in strength is massive.
Yeah.
So that's when we then ended up going to, that's why, again, Kamal then goes again, well, if you can do this in normal people and highly trained machines, you should look at the opposite end of the spectrum, where people have actually lost their cortical ability to activate their muscles, because we were showing it was the drive from the brain to their muscles. And so that's why we ended up back there in Pakistan doing that study and showing it over 65%. And the chiropractor we sent over there, he was literally 1 year out of college.
Wow.
It's still mind-boggling to think about that. And the cool thing is, like, to begin with, and I started publishing this and talking about it, I would get some of these other academics going, well, so what, Heidi, so what? And I'd be going, what? Are you mad? What do you mean, so what? It's a 65% increase in strength in the stroke population. And but once I calmed down, I recognized that it's actually true. It's actually true that we don't actually know, well, how long did that strength last? And did it make those stroke victims better able to move around and activate their muscles? And did it impact their life, their quality of life? So that's why, you know, we were so privileged again to go back a second time. And what we've done now is a clinical trial. And it's so exciting. So a clinical trial will actually measure the outcomes from the patient's perspective. So do they move better? Do they feel better? Can they walk around easier? And the second trial, what we did is we got the physiotherapists at the hospital where we collected the first data. They were really interested now because they saw the changes. I can't tell you how many hoops we had to jump through to get that first study. It was like, no, you can't come over here and experiment on our people. We were like, but it's actually a good thing. But anyway, I mean, we obviously managed to do it, but the attitude changed. And for the second, when we went back for the clinical trial, completely different attitude. Right? We were welcome everywhere. And when we did that study, there were some really interesting bits that came out of it. First and foremost, these Fugl-Meyer scores, which are an assessment done by the physiotherapist, they were completely blinded to which subjects actually got chiropractic care as well as normal physiotherapy. So they didn't know, you know, who were getting what impact. But the Fugl-Meyer scores shows that there is a significantly higher impact in their ability to move around and function. And this was over a 4-week period of chiropractic care. And we then measured the follow-up at 8 weeks. So they've had 4 weeks and only 4 weeks of chiropractic care. And you guys know 4 weeks is nothing really, right? But 4 weeks, chronic stroke patients got chiropractic care a couple of times a week, and they were significantly better after those 4 weeks if they'd had chiropractic care compared to just physiotherapy. And that was kind of maintained out at 8 weeks. So even after 4 weeks of no chiropractic care follow-up. But what amazed me the most was Imran, you know, my bioengineer, Imran, if you've heard me speak before, you would have heard me talk about Imran with his magic hands, right? Because we've been in Turkey doing all these studies there. And Imran, who's my bioengineer, he's always the sham chiropractor when we're in Turkey, because in Turkey, chiropractic doesn't really exist, same as in Pakistan. Now, he won't be the sham chiropractor in Pakistan. And the reason he won't do that is he says that we've got to be white doctors. We all have to be the white doctors. So then we got our Danish bioengineer Rasmus to be the sham chiropractor. So everybody got attention and everybody got seen, but they were either seen, and they just didn't know if they were getting chiropractic care or not because chiropractic doesn't exist. But what was just so remarkable was the stories, because Imran is a Pakistani. He speaks to these people and just talks to them, just, how are you going? And they were talking about this one guy. And again, like, this almost brought tears to Imran's eyes. And I've never seen this man. Nothing rocks him ever. And it was these personal stories that, like, he even, when we were going to present this at the UCA Congress, and I Paul and Charlotte can probably remember, Imran literally came up to me before he was meant to go on stage, and he goes, Heidi, I just need to tell you this story because in case I can't tell it, I need you to tell it for me. Because he was worried that he was going to start crying. But so he tells me about this one guy. First of all, he tells me about this waiter guy. And Kelly's followed up with this story as well. This guy smelled so badly because he was literally living on the streets. I don't know how they even got him in to be part of the study, but it was the hospital that recruited people. But anyway, he couldn't move, and he'd lost his job. He was a waiter. He lost his job because his hand was affected and his leg was affected, so he couldn't hold the tray and he couldn't walk, so he couldn't serve, so he didn't have a job. And the transformation in this one man over the 4-week period, towards the end of the study, he came in and he was like nicely dressed and smelled beautiful, and he was now no longer homeless, no longer living on the street, because he now had a job, because he could walk again. He could walk unaided and he could hold the tray. And this was with the chiropractic care sessions. So the boys that went over there were really incredibly touched by this. But the story that Imran tells me about, because the quality of life, they also measured the quality of life, not just this ability to move, right? And that quality of life was the same at the midway point. So at the end of the chiropractic care, it sort of stayed the same. But at the end, like after 8 weeks when they hadn't had care, it was this massive difference. So the continuation of the improvements after chiropractic care was impacting their quality of life dramatically up to 8 weeks later. And this is where, this story that Imran was telling me about, that this guy who on the first session when he came in to see him, he made a special bond with him because he was from the same little village, or very close to the little village where Imran grew up himself. So they spoke the same little dialect that, other people wouldn't really necessarily understand. There's multiple languages over in Pakistan. And anyway, he was indicating to Imran on that first session, please just kill me. Like, he was literally saying, I just don't want to live anymore. And this is the bit that Imran just chokes up on, because by the end of that study, although he wasn't moving that much better than he was before, the man was smiling and almost telling jokes. And Imran couldn't believe that transformation. And he literally turned to me and said, I don't give a fuck about your politics in chiropractic. If you guys can do that to people's lives, I'm in. And I've never seen this man so dedicated to chiropractic research, because he's seen it with his own eyes in his own people, if you know what I mean, from, his own village of wanting to die to transforming their lives back into being worthwhile living. And I touch on these human stories because mostly I talk about data, and I talk about, this is what the statistics say, but I think the statistics never capture these human beings that are taking part in these studies. And it's the same thing when Kelly Holt did his PhD. I mean, the letters that we got from these older adults that turned up to his PhD studies, the letters we got from these individual older adults that had never really had chiropractic, they were overwhelming. They could sit and eat with their families, and they hadn't been able to for years and years because of some strange neurological wiring in their brain that didn't, allow their swallowing to take place, or they were getting these horrific sounds when they were chewing, and they couldn't stand other people chewing, and it disappeared after chiropractic care. So I think it's extremely important that we remember the human beings. And it may be a silly point for me to bring up because you guys see the human beings, but I suppose I want to let you know that I see these human beings as well. And they're not all captured in the data yet. And I suppose the big takeaway from that is trust your own experience and your gut instincts, and never let anyone tell you that what you're experiencing isn't real. It is real. It's more than real. It's us researchers that need to catch up with you and what you're finding in practice, and explaining it to you. And it shouldn't be the other way around. You guys don't have to justify what you do to me. I mean, that's literally why I'm here, is to help you guys, to support you, because you're doing the hard job of interacting with these human beings and making a difference to their lives. Just on that note, I will get you the references. I did see some comments pop up. I can get you the references of the 3 studies that we have published, the other 2 that we've published, because we haven't published the randomized control trial yet. I just wanted to bring it up with you as a group, because both HELSA and the UCA and the Scottish Chiropractic Association, funded this project. And so I just wanted to say thank you again from the bottom of my heart, because honestly, it's a teamwork thing. If we don't get that funding, we can't do these studies. And just from that one single donation, we've published 3 papers so far and done a clinical trial that's not yet published. But the clinical trial is not yet published, so don't necessarily talk about that too much just yet. We'll get there. Once it's published, we can then start talking about that we'll actually have a beneficial impact on people who've had a stroke. And that to me is kind of a remarkable turnaround of the old stroke link that we've had to deal with. So once again, honestly, guys, thank you so much. If you're part of the UCA and you were part of that big donation, if you're part of HELSA that gave that donation, I mean, it must be several years ago, Ryan, that I was there in London speaking to your group, and you guys just raised the money just boom on the spot. I was just so blown away.
Guys, put me on there. Yeah, I remember when it was years ago, and it was at the time, Heidi, it's so refreshing to hear you say just what a difference it makes. Because honestly, it's been years ago, and I just kind of forgot about it. And I forgot about it, and then understanding what a difference, whether it's 10,000 or 15,000 or 5,000 makes, to the whole trial. It's quite humbling, actually. And so thank you so much for sharing for that. So how many of you realize that, it doesn't take, how many realize that we can donate a little bit every single year to this type of thing so that our profession can be raised? Yes? Awesome. So thank you for mentioning us. I appreciate it.
I mean, it's quite remarkable. I mean, I still joke about the Scots, because Ross McDonald, literally, he's funded me from when I was like a nobody. He's always and there's just a little bit from their entire association every year. They make it part of their association fees, and they sent that money over. And it is unbelievable. Like, we didn't manage to raise any money for that clinical trial, and that's a fucking clinical trial that we've run. So we ran that only based on our own donations and our own money that we've raised. Yeah. But it's so important, and we'll continue to do it because it is so important. And that little bit of extra money, if it wasn't for that, we wouldn't have done the 2nd study and the 3rd study. It's partly funded a PhD guy in Denmark as part of Aalborg University, and it's literally the changes of chiropractic care on brain integration, because he did a whole EEG study where he was whole head EEG and measuring all sorts of amazing changes within their brains of what's happening. Because the key thing we want to understand is now how can adjusting the spine impact someone's brain to that degree, because we know it's coming from the brain, enabling them to more efficiently convert their thoughts back into being able to move their muscles around. So we're continuing to explore that. Another thing I thought it would be quite cool to touch on today, which is why I'm switching gears now, is looking at the immune system link, because I know there's a lot of people that are still a little bit confused about what can I say and what can't I say and all the rest of it when it comes to chiropractic care and the immune system. And some people have the mistaken belief that there is no changes, that there is no credible evidence at all that chiropractic care impacts the immune system. And I understand where that's coming from as well, but I want to get across that there is very good, credible scientific evidence for a basic science link. So, and what that means again is it's that connection between adjusting the spine and changing immune system markers. That's where we've got several papers. And it's actually most of those studies have actually come from CMCC in Canada, which surprised the hell out of me. Not really when I saw the investigators involved, but it was really cool to see that. And I take my hat off to them for doing it, because we hadn't done anything on immune system, but we're looking at it now. So for those of you who haven't heard me talk about the nervous system, immune system links, I also want to point out that there is very, very solid evidence that the nervous system and the immune system communicate. There are still scientists out there that, or not scientists, but there's still people out there that don't realize the nervous system the immune system communicate, but they do big time, both directions. And there's some scientists that even argue that the immune system is like a sensory system for the nervous system, which I thought was really interesting. Literally around the body to sense if there's any invading pathogens or stress or any immune challenge. So they're literally on high alert. There's these little clusters of nerve cells, immune cells, and glial cells. They're called neuroimmune cell units, and they're scattered throughout your body. They're everywhere, and they're literally there sensing for any invading pathogens, injuries, trauma, anything like that. And then they will tell the nervous system what's going on. They'll also set off that initial local inflammation to help control whatever's going on, like, for example, an invading virus. But then what happens is the nervous system, once it is aware that something's going on, it's got two main ways that it can impact the immune response. It can do it either via the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis, so the release of cortisol and adrenaline, or it can do it via the autonomic nervous system, via the sympathetic nervous system, which again activates directly down to the immune area itself and releases noradrenaline. But it can also, the sympathetic nervous system also has a hormonal effect because it also impacts the adrenal glands and releases adrenaline. And this then has that impact in that local area where it's sort of fighting off the invading pathogens. But the brain also activates the parasympathetic nervous system, which is anti-inflammatory, which helps balance things out. Because one thing we're realizing is that you want a balanced immune response. A lot of the people that are overreacting to COVID at the moment, it's because it's an overreactive response. They're having this massive immune response that is shutting down their body and making it extremely difficult for them to breathe. So our nervous system is designed to do a very balanced response in theory, so long as it's allowed to do what it needs to do. So I suppose you can see where I'm going with that. Probably because if we're subluxated, the brain doesn't know what to do accurately, so then it can't get that ideal balance right. But what's cool is that there is this, and I'll send through that to reference as well, is that there's this systematic review and meta-analysis that's looked at, can spinal manipulation impact immune markers, or is there any way that spinal manipulation could impact the immune system? And this is word for word what they conclude in their conclusions of this paper, that there's enough evidence. So they look at all the literature that's out there and summarize it for us. And there's enough evidence out there that spinal manipulation can increase substance P, neurotensin, oxytocin, interleukin levels, and may influence cortisol levels. So there is research articles out there, credible scientific studies showing we change these various neurochemicals that are extremely important for a healthy immune response. The problem is we don't yet know what impact does this have on us clinically. Yeah. Does that mean that it prevents us from getting sick? Does that mean that we speed up our recovery if we are sick? That's what we're lacking. That's what we don't have. Because again, we don't have a single clinical trial, not even one, not one single clinical trial with chiropractic care and boosting immune system. So are you guys keen to make a difference on that one?
Yeah, baby.
Yeah, baby. Seriously, we're designing a study right now, and I will get back to you, Ryan, because I think this is so important. I'll get back to you guys too, Paul. I saw you there. Is we have to do a really, really good large clinical trial at a university setting with immunologists and literally test the impact of chiropractic care prior to an immune challenge, and then to see how you respond to that immune challenge. So we're designing this study now at a university with a bunch of immunologists, and we're really, really excited about it. And so I am going to need funding, and I will get back to you about that one soon. But feel free to start, fundraising already,
I got you.
You're picking up what I'm putting down. Excellent.
Right. I got you.
So where are we at today? Where we're at today is really quite cool. We're at a place now where we've got all this evidence. In the past, it used to be, how on earth could the spine have anything to do with X, Y, and Z, right? How on earth could the spine have anything to do with this, that, and the other thing? How could the spine impact the cranial nerves? The funny thing is, the first time I heard that, someone's literally saying that on television, it was an Australian neurosurgeon. He was absolutely scathing, talking about chiropractic. How could it have anything to do with the cranial nerves? And at that point in time, I was literally in Professor Kemal Turker's lab in Istanbul. And we were collecting this data on a jaw study. And I don't know if you remember back to your jaw, but what innervates the jaw muscles, the jaw clenching muscles, is your cranial nerves. So we were sitting there looking at data right in front of our eyes, showing that when we were adjusting the spine, cranial nerve function was changing. And so that's what the cool thing about the basic science research. It's why basic science is so important. It's not that one's more important than the other. They're both extremely important. But having that understanding of how something could impact something else is extremely important. And that's what the immune research has been done today, the immune system research. It's showing it's physically possible when you put a force into the spine that you can change the way the brain and the body creates these neurochemicals, which are known to be a very important part of an immune response. So it's showing it's possible. And that's also what we've done with all our brain research. We're showing it's possible. And that's the difference between the basic science and the clinical science. So the basic science research is answering how something works, but it impacts everybody else's understanding. If we still hang on to the bone out of place squashing nerve roots, people will continue to laugh at us and say, well, it's absolutely physically impossible for that to change lives and function. So, just go away and shut up. But, if you start to say, well, no, actually, we have this neuroplastic effect and it impacts these, the brain changes, it's so and funny. It takes me 5 minutes to explain to a neuroscientist what chiropractic is, what a subluxation is, and the impact of chiropractic care. And some of them will even turn around and go, well, yeah, I get it, Heidi. You don't need to go on about it. I mean, of course, it's a neuroplastic effect. What else could it be? And I'm going, oh, God. I'm still trying to convince my profession.
Wow.
and here you're telling me to shut up. Of course, it's neuroplasticity. I'm going, oh. But anyway, so my point is it's a biologically plausible mechanism for how chiropractic care can impact anything in the body. Doesn't mean we fix everything, but it can impact anything in the body because we have that direct neuroplastic impact on the brain. And what gets even more exciting, and well, actually, before I get into what gets even more exciting, the other side of the story is that it is so important we do the clinical research as well. And it's not been my favorite cup of tea because I've never had the need to prove that chiropractic care works. And that's usually what the clinical research is about because I know it works, right? So in my heart, I always know it works, but I wanted to know how the fuck can it do this? and the cool thing about that is I never really cared what my results were because I didn't give a fuck if it worked this way or that way. I mean, I just want to know how does it work? So that was the cool thing for me as a scientist. But the clinical research is actually extremely important. And I've understand that more so now than ever, especially through this COVID craziness, because when you look now as a profession, we don't have a single clinical trial. If we had one decent, good, high quality clinical trial showing that we improved immune system function, then, you wouldn't have all these people getting into so much trouble just for saying that, oh, hey, we might boost the immune system.
Well, Heidi, I think Heidi said there, imagine we had just one. Oh, like we would, we would be the answer. You guys understand? Like just one. Like so, the difference between like funding this one study. By the way, Corona's not going anywhere. I hope you guys realize that, eh? It's not going anywhere. So it's not too late to be that one.
And it's not even just for now, right? It's for our future generations.
Of course.
I mean, is there anyone there that thinks for some reason that chiropractic care would not change immune system function for your patients?
I mean, here's the thing is that we, when it comes to so much the fear in the marketplace, and what I've seen, I've worked with so many docs now, and even verbalizing that will send many of you into a state of slight shaking because of the fear from your regulatory bodies. Am I speaking the truth? Yes or yes? You guys with me? Yes? But when you hear someone that's not, what I love about what Heidi said, she doesn't care what the result is. Her job is a researcher. So when you hear it from a researcher, it changes your certainty. You guys agree with me, yes? that is it. It's the fact. So that changes everything, Heidi. Explaining that to us, and in that way, it's not opinion. It's a fact. The markers are there. They've been proven. So yeah.
Obviously, I'm not proposing that anyone goes out and says anything on social media or in emails or on Facebooks, because you guys know with the ASA that you're not allowed to say anything unless we have that high level of clinical evidence. And the key is to get that level of clinical evidence. We can't just do one clinical trial.
No.
But my point is, if we even have one clinical trial, then at least we could start talking about it. We can still start talking about it now because of the basic science evidence that's there. But we don't yet know, just because you have an increase in, say, substance P, we don't yet know, well, what impact is that actually having on our immune system? And is it stopping us from getting sick or speeding up our recovery? They're the things that we don't yet know. So we can't say that yet. But to get that high level of clinical evidence, that's where we're talking about the pain research and stuff like that. On that topic of stress, though, Ryan, I'm going to sidetrack a little bit again, just because I can. Keep in mind, guys, how much stress is going on, not just for yourselves, but for all the people out there, that are so terrified and scared. Glenn, my husband, cannot stand this coronavirus stuff. He absolutely hates it. He hates any kind of governmental, control over his life, and he goes mad. And I keep having to remind him, honey. Look at those people, they're wearing masks. I'm going, love, these people are frightened,
Yeah.
They're not out to get you, but they're frightened people. There are so many people that are scared shitless over this whole thing. And that fear, the negative impact of that fear, it's another thing I've been speaking a lot about this last year, is that impact of that fear, because there is now so much evidence coming out in neuroscience research that I'm reading all about this negative impact of anxiety, fear, social trauma. And right now, I think of people losing their jobs, losing their homes. All of that is massive amounts of trauma. They might have people that are sick, friends that are sick, and then they're terrified they're going to die. All of this is major, major trauma. What's coming out of the research is showing that this kind of emotional stress is probably leading to most of the chronically ill conditions that people end up with in Western worlds today, because of the way that the stress shuts down the prefrontal cortex. So that bit behind our forehead, right behind our forehead, is the prefrontal cortex, and it literally gets turned off with stress. The other cool thing that stress does, and I shouldn't call it cool, but I'm fascinated by it, so to me it's cool, right, is stress actually shuts down the little muscles close to the spine and skull, which from a neurophysiological perspective will set up a central segmental motor control problem, which is, in a neurophysiological language, a chiropractic subluxation. So all of a sudden we're finding this research now that's showing us that not only do you need trauma, physical trauma or injuries that can actually turn off the little muscles close to the spine and skull and cause subluxations, but so can emotional stress. So you have people that are stressed out. Guess what's happening? They are getting subluxated and their prefrontal cortex is turning off. Why that's important is the prefrontal cortex is your rational thinking. It's your logical thinking. It's gone. What else is gone is that activation of the anti-inflammatory, the cholinergic anti-inflammatory system. So you no longer have that balance in your immune response. But also the negative consequence of turning off the anti-inflammatory system is your inflammations levels rise. And we have all this evidence now that shows us that there are so many diseases and conditions that are associated with high levels of inflammation. For example, a lot of neurological diseases, strokes, diabetes, Alzheimer's disease, cardiovascular disease, heart attacks, pulmonary disease, autoimmune conditions, cancers, all mental health, chronic pain and arthritis, colitis, Crohn's disease. All of these conditions are connected with high levels of inflammation. And you look at all of this stress research and it shows us stress turns off the prefrontal cortex, shuts down that anti-inflammatory system, inflammation levels start to rise, and these conditions start to come. So I'm literally saying, watch out in the next decade, and we're going to have such an increase in these conditions that are related to high levels of inflammation because of these years of this COVID pandemic stress. It doesn't just need to be, obviously, this COVID pandemic. I just think that that's a massive, massive impact. And there's already shitloads of research articles talking about the impact of mental health that this all the isolation that has been going on. And again, isolation, like that's again something that we can impact with our tribes, just reaching out to our people for whatever reason. And I love that idea of the forwarding the email on saying that you were thinking about a person and caring about them. That alone can impact a person's immune system, because this isolation and fear and loneliness is part of this stuff that turns down that prefrontal cortex and increases inflammatory levels, which literally screws up their immune system responses and causes a lot of these conditions to start developing to begin with. And there's loads of other traumas and stresses that go along with it. And just in case I haven't shown you guys this one yet, if you haven't seen it, the hand model, Dan Siegel's hand model, is one of the best ways to explain this to patients. So I just want to talk you through it. You literally tell people that the part of the brain that we're really looking for, or the one that we know that we chiropractors can impact, is this part of the brain right behind our foreheads called the prefrontal cortex. So these fingers here represent the prefrontal cortex, and they're right over my thumb. Now my thumb is my limbic brain, and my wrist here is the brain stem that regulates your breathing and your heart rate and stuff. Your limbic brain is where your emotions sit. So when you get all emotional and angry or upset or crying, that's here in the limbic brain. But normally the prefrontal cortex controls our emotions quite nicely. It keeps them under check. That limbic brain. But what happens under stress is stress turns off the prefrontal cortex, and you go into your limbic brain. And you can talk about examples. People have always had a fight with their significant other, and what happens when you go into that fight and you get emotional is that your rational brain goes out of the picture. When you get emotional, you're in your limbic brain and it's not working very well. So what we do, we know we impact this part of the brain, but then it gets quite important to also mention to people that part of the brain, that prefrontal cortex, it does a whole host of things. It doesn't just control our emotional responses, and it's not just our logical reasoning. It's actually thought of as our executive functions, or it's known to be responsible for our executive functions, and that's literally almost equates to intelligence. So intelligence, executive functions, it's our working memory, it's our self-control, our self-monitoring, being able to be flexible in your thinking, or to plan and prioritize tasks and achieve those tasks. It all requires a functional prefrontal cortex. We also know that the prefrontal cortex is extremely important for every single movement that you make. So every movement you make, the prefrontal cortex is one of those multimodal integration centers. So it senses everything that's going on in your body, and it then helps you, because it knows what your goal is, what you want to achieve, and then it helps you achieve it, even to the point of making sure movements are coordinated together. It works with the cerebellum in this case. We also know that it's extremely important for pain processing, which is why pain can now be a great way of talking about plasticity, because all the latest research on pain tells us that it has to do with neuroplasticity in the brain, chronic pain, that is. So the prefrontal cortex is a part of that pain matrix that senses pain, and the prefrontal cortex actually inhibits pain quite a bit. So if, again, the prefrontal cortex is not working, often pain levels rise, and you'll see that it goes hand in hand with fear. Pain is now considered our danger warning system of our brain. And normally that is controlled, the danger warning is controlled by the prefrontal cortex, your rational brain. But if that's out the window because of fear and stress and anxiety and panic, well, then you don't have that. So up goes the pain levels. And like I was talking about before, that the prefrontal cortex is actually key to monitoring the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis and balancing the autonomic nervous system. And if you remember what I started off with, is that the immune system, the way the brain impacts the immune system is by impacting the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis and balancing the autonomic nervous system, the sympathetic side and the parasympathetic side. Well, the prefrontal cortex is key for both of those. So we also know that the prefrontal cortex is vital for your immune system's proper function. And we've got a study showing we impact that part of the brain. I mean, it literally couldn't be better for us chiropractors, this research. It's phenomenal. But again, it's basic science, and we now need to do the clinical trial to see, well, is this change in the prefrontal cortex that we've previously published and documented, is that related to improvements in all these areas that we know that the prefrontal cortex does? And again, thanks to this amazing chiropractor in the UK called Jerome Papel. I don't know if you know Jerome, but he's an awesome dude. And he's good friends with the Duke of Bedford. And the Duke of Bedford and Jerome, they have both donated a rather large amount of money. I'm not allowed to disclose how much the Duke has donated, but a large enough amount for us to do a clinical trial, literally assessing prefrontal cortex function from a period of chiropractic care. So we have the ethics to do that. It's via King's College in London. And we've got a great collaborator there, Dr. Ernest. And we're going to be doing this in Henley in Jerome's clinic. So if anyone can help us get patients, obviously when you guys are out of lockdown and we're allowed to actually do that. But if you are involved in that area around Henley on Thames, sorry, get it right. Then that would be absolutely phenomenal, because we need subjects. Jerome will be taking care of these people. We have the ethics all in place. We just need to be allowed to collect data, which we're not allowed to at the moment. And we will be assessing, then we'll be measuring the brain measures again in the prefrontal cortex, but we will also be measuring those clinical functional outcomes, so that we could start to say, hopefully, fingers crossed, is that this impact we have on the prefrontal cortex is a good thing. Because again, of course, a lot of people are asking me, well, how do we know that? But yay, me and Lil can help. Amelia, awesome, wonderful. You've got to send me through these contacts, Ryan, because this is really, really awesome. But I'm really, really excited about this, because the way the world is going at the moment, with the amount of stress that is impacting us and pushing us in a very, very negative direction, right? And in many cases, like here in New Zealand, we weren't even allowed to see our patients. And I mean, that just about made me want to cry. Can you imagine, at least you guys are allowed to be open, right? You're allowed to see people. And what I've heard is that most people right now, even though that it is during a lockdown, a lot of people are still going to their chiropractor because they're recognizing the importance of health, and they see they can feel the benefits with chiropractic care. So what I would like you to be able to do in your offices, I wouldn't go advertising it out on the social media or anything like that, but once people are in your office, you can start talking about this connection with your patients. We now understand why we could impact your immune system. We know from studies that we can change these neuromarkers. We know our scientists are trying to do clinical trials right now. We know that we change the processing of this prefrontal cortex just behind your forehead. And that's very, very important for controlling the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis and your autonomic nervous system. And that's the key ways that your brain can impact the immune system. So if you're wondering how, your spine, could impact your health, your well-being, and your mental health as well, because that prefrontal cortex controls our emotional expression and our emotional well-being. And again, you could even talk about the oxytocin study that has been shown, that's been done previously, because that oxytocin chemical, that's your well-being chemical. That's your love chemical, and that is increased with chiropractic care. And there's nothing, I can't find a single study that shows increasing oxytocin is a bad thing. You can actually find that with substance P and neurotensin, but not with oxytocin. That is our well-being chemical, our love, our bonding chemical, and that's released and increased under chiropractic care. And it has an important part of the immune system. So there are so many cool things that you can mention or talk about. And again, if you don't remember how to say them all, that's why we make those little whiteboard animations that I'm sure you've seen before, all available at the Reality Check. So there's loads of those if you want to be able to play them in your waiting room, because in your offices, my understanding, in your office, you can talk to them about all research. You just can't put it out there in the external marketing on Facebook and social media and things like that. And that's where the difference between the internal marketing and the external marketing plays a big role. So where does this leave us right now? Literally, we know that stress is making people sick. We know that stress causes mental illness, and we know that stress chronically long-term causes all these chronic diseases that I mentioned before, including, cancers, coronary artery disease, strokes, diabetes, Alzheimer's. There's known pathophysiological links between stress and trauma. And when I say there is a lot of research, there is a lot of research. Like I literally I go to neuroscience conferences, and I've been doing that now for 20 years. And I particularly go to this one called Society for Neuroscience in the States. It's on every year. And I've been literally going for 20 years. And when I went last year in Chicago, couldn't go this year, obviously. Well, I could have, but virtually. But anyway, last year in Chicago, I literally run from session to session, and you pre-plan it. So it's the only time I ever pre-plan anything, really. Because there's 30,000 neuroscientists there, and most of them are presenting something, which means you need to choose what sessions you want to go to. And what struck me when I was there was just how much research was available on stress and trauma, the emotional stress and the negative impact that has on the brain, how it affects us, how it shuts down certain parts of the brain, like the prefrontal cortex, how it amplifies the amygdala, how this causes addictions. It's linked with sociopaths, and it's linked with addictive behaviors. All of the opioid crisis and all of this is linked with a heightened limbic system because of the shutdown of the prefrontal cortex. So this is connected. I literally could have spent my entire 5 days running from session to session and only listened to the effects of trauma. That's how much research is on that topic. and just out of interest, if there's any other geeks out there, there was a couple of other topics that really struck me from that conference that were remarkably different. Because, like, honestly, 20 years ago, guys, if there was anything to do with psychological stress, it would have been like, well, why is this brought up here? That belongs to the psychology department. It literally wasn't considered neuroscience. But now it's like I could have spent 5 days running around just listening to the effects of emotional stress and trauma, which is how big a neuroscience topic it's become. Another topic that has changed dramatically is the importance of our gut and our microbiome. Yeah. Again, like 20 years ago, the gut was really considered a department for gastroenterology, nothing to do with neuroscience, But now we know that gut literally is our second brain. And again, I literally could have spent the whole 5 days at that neuroscience conference running from session to session, only learning about the impact of the gut and the microbiome on brain function, on our health. So if it's something that you're into, just know that you're on the right track. This is coming. That's the reason I'm bringing this up to you guys. Often new knowledge has a life cycle. It becomes new within the science world, but then it becomes overwhelming within the science world as a fact. And then in the next 10, 20 years, it becomes common knowledge that everybody knows about. And I want you guys to be the ones that are speaking about that, the overwhelming understanding before anyone else. So you're the one that your patients hear it from first. That's really, really cool. If you've already been talking about, gut health and brain health, then that's a fantastic thing, because it is definitely coming. And even understanding the effects of stress and trauma, because a lot of people are going through stress and trauma. And if you explain what impact this can have on people's health and ways to mitigate it, like talk about mindfulness meditation, talk about exercise, not pushing them beyond their means, but literally just talking about these measures to counteract the stress that's going on. And the things to include in that is obviously chiropractic care, because you need to activate those little muscles that have been switched off because of the stress and trauma, so that your brain can accurately perceive what's going on in your body and your world around you. I mean, that's obviously key number one. Number two is to actually move a little bit, get around and exercise. And again, if people don't exercise at all, encourage them literally to walk around the block every day. And then every time you see them, just go, how's it going? Are you managing to walk around the block? And then eating healthy foods, because the diet is the biggest impact on that microbiome. Although if someone's on antibiotics or anything like that, obviously they really would need to take probiotics as well. And then the other massive change that I've noticed over these 20 years of going to neuroscience conferences is the change in understanding of what pain is. Pain is not some little local problem that happened because of an injury. It's not in the discs, it's not in the facets. I'm not saying that they're not involved, I'm not saying that they're not important, but chronic pain is known to be a learnt problem within the brain. So the brain learns that problem, and there is a danger warning signal that's going off. And I think the biggest impact that we have by checking and adjusting spines and checking and adjusting people is that we improve the communication. So the brain knows more accurately what's going on in the body, and therefore can help heal the system. There's even some studies that are really fascinating by Candace McCabe, showing that if there's incongruent sensory information that comes to the brain, that incongruent information alone is enough to make the brain feel pain. So that's why I reckon a subluxation, which really from a neurophysiological perspective is an incongruent sensory information, is enough. Subluxations is enough for the brain to feel that danger warning signal going off, and the brain can cause you to feel pain from that. And I think what we are doing as chiropractors is exercising the spine back into proper function. And what I mean by that is we know that injury, again, or stress can neurologically switch off the little muscles close to the spine and skull. And those little muscles the brain needs to sense what's going on in the spine. And if the brain doesn't know what's going on in the spine because they're neurologically switched off, the brain can't control the movement patterns of that part of the spine appropriately. And if it does that over time, if it's faultily controlling those movement patterns over time, it sets up this micro traumas that keep happening, because say it might be moving the vertebra when it shouldn't, or it might be stiffening up the vertebra when it shouldn't. And so you get these little micro traumas that will build up over time. So that's probably why we end up with the tenderness to the touch. When we check a subluxation and you poke on it, it goes, oh yeah, that hurts there. Yeah, I can feel that. That's probably because of a whole lot of little micro traumas. When we go in and we adjust them, you get this massive bombardation and increase in the brain that lights up the brain. So it's fully aware of what's happening at that part of the spine. And then, of course, it probably can control it better. So this is kind of where we're at with our understanding about why that spinal function is so important for the brain to be aware of what's going on. But what's so cool too is over the last 20 years in the research that we've been doing is we know that adjusting the spine like we do, adjusting subluxations, it doesn't just change the way the brain is aware and controls the spine, because we've done all these other studies showing that it also changes the way the brain integrates what's happening in the sound and visual system. So, and it's these multimodal integration centers again. You see, that's why it gets back to the prefrontal cortex and the subluxation and the cerebellum, sorry, because what's changing is the way the brain is integrating all that multimodal sensory information. Like, for example, improving the way we perceive sound and visual information. Like, I don't think adjustments is changing the way our eyes are perceiving the lights. I don't think it's changing the way our ears is sensing vibrations in the air. But what I think is changing is the way that the brain is integrating. What does that mean? What does that sound mean? What does this visual input mean to us? And then what do we do about it? I think it's those multimodal integration centers that are changing. And I don't just think that, I know that in some ways, because we have seen in our studies changes in the prefrontal cortex and the cerebellum. And these are our multimodal integration centers. That's what's so cool about that basic science research about the subluxation. And Ryan, I've gotten myself completely lost and off track there. Are there any questions that we can take on this?
Heidi, you've got full right to get as sidetracked and go off on tangent as you want. How many of you think listening to Heidi can increase your certainty? And how many of you realize that she knows what she's talking about? Woo, awesome, right? so listen, I just want to say this. We will take some questions, but I just want to first say, Heidi, what's so interesting about whenever I listen to you speak about the thing you do, and it's interesting. Frank Vort spoke earlier today, and one of the topics that came up was passion, and people will, pay and show up to watch a fire burning with passion, right? And one of the things, how many can tell that Heidi is passionate about the thing she does? How many can tell that, right? And what I think, Heidi, what you've done, and the biggest blessing you can give us as chiropractors, if you've bridged the gap between what happens with most people is like the perception of research and analytics and that type of thing. And what Heidi does is deliver it, communicate it in such a way that's digestible. And most importantly, if you know what most researchers are like, she does it with passion. You guys understand? Yes? It's the energy behind the delivery and mixed with the clinical knowledge that I think will make a huge difference in it. So first of all, for just appreciation for Heidi, give her some love, wave the screen, give her some love. You guys are awesome. So Heidi, a couple questions. So listen, I would like to open up to questions. So This is an opportunity. Not often you get to, ask the world's leading researcher in chiropractic these questions directly. So take the opportunity. My chihuahuas. Where are my chihuahuas? So Heidi, there's a concept in selling, if you will, is that chihuahuas love to sell with stats and research, and they love. So I can see them. Where's Luke? I can see you got he's writing everything. Where's Janine? Janine, you're taking notes. Everyone's taking notes, etc. So those people specifically, I know they're like chomping at the bit. Because who would like to ask a question and then scroll across so I can see.
It took me a long time in practice, Ryan, to learn that not everybody was like me. and I have learned the hard way that you need to treat people not the way you want to be treated. You need to treat people the way they want to be treated. And it's such a truth. And it took me a long time in practice to not just tell everybody every detail that I would want to know, because people are different, and I do get that. But if there are people out there that want, because I can still talk for another hour if you want, and there's so many topics that I get so excited about, and I'm not quite sure where you guys are at and what you're most interested in knowing. So
awesome. Well, listen, I tell you, one person who's that chomping at the bit to ask you a question is our presidente there, Paul McCrossan.
Yay!
So
hey, Paul.
Paul, go for it. Ask a question. Go for it.
Heidi, it's always a pleasure. Hello, everyone. One of the criticisms that gets levelled is with basic science is that it's a one-off event. So we do a single adjustment, we get a change in effect or whatever physiological function, be it immune system, be it cortical activity, and then they say, okay, how long does this last for?
Yeah.
So could you just speak to that? Because I think that certainly helps with people's understanding and certainty.
Because it is absolutely true. Once you've done a study and it's a basic science study, we know it's just like that one-off thing, right? But to begin with, you first got to realize, because some people criticize our research because of that. But the thing is, you've got to realize when you're doing basic science research, you're not actually allowed to follow people up over longer periods of time until you've first shown that you can have an impact. So people go, well, why didn't you measure them for 3 days? And I'm like, well, because we're not actually allowed to. Ethics committees stop people from experimenting on other human beings for a reason. Like you just look at the Nuremberg trials and do your history on the Second World War, and you realize why scientists aren't just allowed to do whatever they want, because it can be quite cruel. And so that's why the ethics committees are there to protect you. So there's reasons why we only start with if there is an effect. But like we used to think, before we did the research we've done, we used to think that we impacted people's cranial nerves, right? That we took pressure off cranial nerves. Well, you look at the research about that there is no evidence really that supports a squashed nerve root theory, other than if you've got radiating nerve root lesions. So you've got radiating arm or pain down your arm or your leg. And the only evidence we have that we can do any benefit to those people is that we might be able to get them out of pain. But what's fascinating with the same model is it shows these changes up to the brain. But to get to Paul's point, we know that there can be, like the evidence so far is on single sessions. And some people say, well, so what? You don't know how long that lasts. Well, there's two things about that. Knowing how something changes impacts the way that you would run a clinical trial. And this is what they often forget. Like, for example, what we might find from basic science research and from population-based research or from practice-based research networks is that once you understand how something works, it helps you to design your clinical trials better. Like there's quite a few clinical trials out there that show that, chiropractic care doesn't work. But it could be that chiropractic care doesn't work because they are manipulating, a single joint, and they're not actually taking into account that they need to be adjusted at subluxated segments. So, for example, right now we're looking at a study where we are applying a thrust to a level where you are subluxated versus thrusting at a level where there is no subluxation, and then measuring the outcomes in brain measures, right, to see, does it change that? To breathe. but I can't breathe. It's just too exciting, too much to talk about. And it actually seems to impact, it seems to have a difference. So we're publishing that study right now where the changes in the brain take place when you've actually thrust at the subluxated segment. There are some scientists out there that are arguing that subluxation should just be thrown out. It's got nothing to do with us. And all we need to do is just manipulate the spine. Well, I don't know a single chiropractor that just randomly manipulates the spine or just manipulates where it hurts. But supposedly that's what they are advocating. But that would be insane, because it again, from this research that we've just done, shows that if you're just thrusting randomly at the spine, it doesn't have that impact on the brain that adjusting a subluxation does have. So another thing that to take into account, what this means then when you're doing clinical research, is you've got to have people in your study that actually are subluxated, and that those subluxations are impacting the way the brain is processing and controlling that particular symptom that you're testing in your clinical trial. For example, when they did the study in kids with bedwetting, they found that only 25% of the kids responded to chiropractic care. And this was only over a few weeks worth of chiropractic care, but only 25% responded. But those 25% got over 50% better. So when you start looking, but if you look at the overall clinical trial, there was this tiny little improvement, and you're just like, oh, well, it's no big deal. Chiropractic care doesn't work. Don't bother. But what about that 25% of the kids that did respond? So then you kind of need to look at, well, can we maybe identify people who are subluxated and then also have changes within their nervous system that is causing the symptoms that you're looking at? Imagine if you could objectively measure that. Then that gets into really interesting territory as well. So, and also another thing that might matter is, for example, it might be that our skill level matters.
Yeah.
It might be that you can't just do a weekend course in spinal manipulation and then expect to get the same changes in practice that you and I get, that, when we've been in practice for many, many years. So these are all the basic science questions that would feed into a lot of clinical trials are done by chiropractic students. And I don't know about you, but I was shit when I was a chiropractic student. I was terrible. Imagine doing a clinical trial with chiro students and then from that concluding that chiropractic care doesn't work. It doesn't work that way. And so until you show, like, again, we're doing a study at the moment where we've got gurus and students. And so we've got students doing their adjustments, and then we've got a guru, like, who's been practicing many, many, many years doing an adjustment. And we again looking at the outcomes, what happens neurophysiologically, and there's a difference. So of course this has to go to the next level, and we have to do the clinical trials. But another thing is, some of our basic science studies, like, we've shown changes that last a week, like the jaw study, we followed them up a week. So now that we've done enough of these basic science studies, we are allowed to follow them for a little bit longer. And in that jaw study, we followed them up for a week, and it was still there. The other thing to keep in mind with basic science is most people don't have control over their V waves or their H reflexes or their, you can't control that. How many of you even know what an MRCP is, let alone change it in a particular way? So that's the cool thing about basic science is you can't impact it the same way that you could impact a clinical trial. So there's many, many benefits. Of course, they also limitations. So that's why you need both sets of research. And it's why we now have to follow up and do these clinical trials and why they're so important. Someone else asked me, Ryan, how do we define a subluxation? Some really bit of interesting there. If you've heard that chiropractors can't reliably find a subluxation, it's really, really interesting, because a lot of the old research on that topic used a statistic called the ICC statistic. And the problem with the ICC statistic is that there is an assumption with the ICC statistic that what you're looking for has an equal chance of being at any level. So what that means is, if you were doing cervical spine and you were assessing for a subluxation, then you have to be equally every segment of the spine to be able to use the ICC statistic to determine if two chiropractors can find that same subluxation. Problem is, I don't know if you've noticed this in practice, we're not equally able to get subluxated at every level of the spine. I don't know if you've noticed, but those transitional segments tend to be far more often subluxated than some of the other segments, right? Often it's upper cervical, often it's the CT junction, often it's the TL junction, often it's the sacroiliac joints or L5. Those transitional segments tend to be more subluxated. And what we found, and this is not me, but this is like Kelly Holt, the guy I work with, and he's been doing this work with Rubenstein in the United States. He's an awesome dude. They've done a lot of this research and literally played around with the data and shown that the statistic that's been used in the past is actually wrong. And the latest research, what this means is if you use an appropriate statistic that doesn't assume that you can be equally subluxated at every segment, all of a sudden, and this has been now several studies have shown that we are actually the same, like two different chiropractors can find exactly the same subluxated area. You also need to take into some of the other problems with the past, like one chiropractor might say it's C3, and another chiropractor might call the same segment C4. And so they because they called it something different, even though they were on the same spot, that kind of stuff. But if you take into account all of these flaws with past research, and this is why research evolves and changes, because we learn that, there's a better statistic, there's a better way of measuring this, there's a more appropriate way that gets rid of these flaws in the research, you get better results, more accurate results. And it could have been that we found that we still weren't able to find subluxations, but that's actually not the case. So it's showing up now that we are reliably able to find the stuck segment with intersegmental range of motion. We are reliably able to find the segment that hurts. So they're the two scientific ways that we define a subluxation from a neurophysiological perspective, not from a neurophysiological perspective, but from a research science perspective. I use those two criteria. So the subluxation has to at least have intersegmental range of motion abnormalities and tenderness to touch. I still use whatever I use as a chiropractor, and it includes motion palpation and it includes tenderness to touch. I mean, I would just naturally do that anyway. But they're key ways that we would then double check that we're on a subluxated segment. And there now is good research showing that we can reliably find subluxations. The same or different chiropractors can find that. That becomes important because then we can start narrowing down. And this is actually a study that we're doing right now. Can I tell you about that?
Yeah.
It's this really cool study that NCMIC in the United States has funded. We've got this French dude over, so Lucien, and the French government has funded, partly funded his PhD scholarship, and NCMIC has funded the other half, and then NCMIC has funded the project. And what we're looking at is we've got this new toy. Imran is very, very happy. It's got 400 channels where we can record 400 channels worth of EMG, which means we can put these high density grids onto muscles. We're also recording biomechanics or the movements of the spine. And so we've got these two grids all over the erector spina muscles on the lower, in the lumbar spine and in the thoracic spine, which means from that they can do this, the source localization study when we were able to calculate, because we had whole head EEG, we could calculate exactly where in the brain we were changing things, and we discovered we were changing the prefrontal cortex. We're now doing the same thing with these high grid EMG channels over subluxated segments and non-subluxated segments. And we're looking at people that are healthy or people that are in subclinical, which means that they're developing spinal problems, but they're not in pain on the day we're testing them. So we know things are going wrong, that, they're subluxated. And then we're looking at people that are in chronic pain. And we're going to see if there's differences and we can tell from these high-grid EMGs if there's changes in the way the brain is controlling the muscles and also the way the brain is controlling movements. So we're doing movements with them as well. And it's a phenomenal study. It's a ridiculously expensive study, but we should really be able to see then, is the neurophysiology, is the way the brain controlling the spine different around a subluxated area versus a non-subluxated area? And also, how is the brain changing the way it controls movement patterns in the spine? And does that change again after an adjustment? So it really should get at this physiology that subluxations do exist, or that dysfunction in the spine exists. And it's literally just poor control from the brain, not literally just, but, and that is something that we impact, that we can improve that movement patterns of the brain when we get there.
Very, very nice. I know, Heidi, one of the biggest things that your research impacted me, especially at the beginning of my career, and it was a story you told, and you spoke about how at the beginning of your career, all the messages we get from different places within the chiropractic profession was this belief that, sometimes we tend to over-adjust or over-treat or over-manipulate or whatever you want to call it, and it's your journey as a researcher. I loved this line. It was your journey as a researcher that made you realize that we've only just scratched the surface in many of the stuff we do. And one particular study, I think it was the fall study, was like that. It was a massively impactful study, but the true effect really only happened after their third month, I believe, or something along those lines. And I loved that concept that you went through as, I want to say skeptic. Skeptic's not the word, but
I was, Ryan. Don't worry, I was. Yeah, I was. Yeah, I mean, I grew up in the medical model. I mean, my dad's a medical doctor, and I really used to think that we overtreated people, and if you couldn't fix people in 5 or 6 visits, then they went to chiropractic case, and I really did start out that way, but it literally was the research, because what's coming out of the research is that we are exercising the spine to function better.
Yes.
And like, you can't go 5 times to the gym and expect to be fit for life. You can maybe notice a difference after 5 sessions, but it's not going to make that ongoing change. Yeah. And that's where, like, I think most people are probably underservicing their patients.
Yes.
We've obviously got to be careful when it comes to making claims about this. I totally get that. But again, this is something that the basic science can help us by explaining how an adjustment works.
Yeah.
If it is on par with exercising, like, if people understand that if they've had an injury to the spine, it's something that they understand better than having stress, but an injury to the spine over 6 months to a year ago, we know that little muscles close to the spine and skull have atrophied. And if anybody has had an atrophied muscle, like if they've had a muscle in a cast and they've seen that shrunken muscle, it's going to take some time to exercise. If you then recognize that at any exercise program, it takes 4 weeks before you even get any changes to the muscle, 4 weeks of exercise, because the first 4 weeks is neural changes only. And then you start to get the bulking up of the muscle again. Well, translate that into chiropractic care. We're exercising the spine to function better. You had an injury 2 years ago with that car accident, had a bit of whiplash, right? And I can feel that here in your neck because it's a mess. And even if you use EMG, surface EMG, and you get those silent patches where there's nothing, that's where the problem is, not where there's hyperactivity. That's compensations. Well, mostly. But anyway, it's going to take you more than 4 weeks before you even get real physiological changes in the muscles themselves, those little muscles. And those little muscles need to change back into, like, we know they change in their fiber types even, Ryan. Like, so they're completely become dysfunctional and atrophied. And that's going to take a bit of time. Heidi, it's okay to explain this to patients.
Yeah, what I always battle with, or what surprises me, is why we don't make more of the analogy. If we work in the same tissues and processes that we do, any exercise psychologist would go through, or exercise expert would go through, why in the world do we not give it the same gravitas, if you will? Like, if you're getting ready for a marathon, or to really simplify it now, how are we possibly supposed to change anything in the body in that short space of time? And literally for me, that was one of the biggest changes I got within my treatment care plans, in my certainty, the belief that the thing that I'm doing was that understanding from a research base was your story of saying, hey, like, I was there, I was the person that actually believed that, and it was the research that made me go, we haven't even touched the surface, and it takes time from a healing perspective. So I just quickly wanted to say,
one of the cool studies to actually use there to talk about is a study from Kelly Holt's PhD, and in the older adults, where he showed that after 8 weeks, there was no difference after 4 weeks, there was no difference between the chiro group and the control group in the outcome of taking a faster compensatory step. But at 12 weeks, when we remeasured it at 12 weeks, there was this massive difference in the ability to take a fast step. What we concluded from that is that some changes, like some perceptual changes, happen really fast, can happen immediately, but there are some changes within the nervous system that take time. And in this case, somewhere between 4 weeks and 12 weeks before that ability to take a fast step. And we think, again, it's because you had to perceive the light going on, and then you had to decide if you were moving your left foot or your right foot. And then you had to actually move it and put it down as fast as you could. And those complex interactions within the nervous system obviously took somewhere between 4 and 12 weeks. And so these are cool little studies to have up your sleeve, just to be able to talk about, from a science perspective, why some changes may take some time before they actually, show up, and that's again why more chiropractic care or periods of chiropractic. Obviously, if there's absolutely no changes, and I've just had this conversation with another group as well, that like some people say, well, if there's no change, if there's absolutely no change at all, and you've seen them for 6 weeks and they're starting to get shitty about it, then let them go. But if there are changes, and it might be just like a 10% change in their chief complaint that they came in with, but they've also noticed all these other things. I've actually noticed I'm sleeping better. I actually noticed I can concentrate a bit easier. You know, if you are seeing these other changes and there's a little change in their chief complaint, that is justification enough to continue with chiropractic care, because some things are going to take a bit of time to heal. It also depends on where they're on in that stress continuum, how much shit's going on in their life. The more shit they've got going on in their life, the more stressors they have, the more inflammation that's built up over many years, well, then that's going to take time to come back down again as well, which is then also going to influence their ability to heal and get better. This is where the heart rate variability is really quite cool, because it actually measures your nervous system's adaptability. So it measures overall health, and it's a great tool to use to monitor a patient's improvements over time. I just wouldn't measure it pre and post an adjustment, just warning anybody that hasn't used heart rate variability. It actually tends to go the opposite way. Pre and post adjustment. But over time, if you get them monitoring it in the mornings, it's really good. And we're actually including that now in several of our clinical trials to see the impact of it.
Very nice. So listen, I just want to first give you the grid, if I can say, so I can see everyone. I first want to say this. How many of you learned a ton from Heidi? Awesome. So yeah, Heidi, well, it's the wrong time to be asking you this with coronavirus, but how many of you would love if we can try and make it work sometime when Heidi's in the United Kingdom here or something like that, that we do something together here? Yes? Amazing, right? So Heidi, we just want to honor you and say thank you so much for helping us bridge the gap. Helping us to bridge the gap between the thing that we love and the thing that we just love to speak about and our passion already, and to really bridge that gap with that science and that, etc. Because a lot of us are not skilled at that. So you make such a huge difference. We appreciate you. I thank you for getting up at 5:30 in the morning to help us all serve better. But here's what I know: every single person on this call Monday morning, raise your hand if you're going to have more intention and belief in the thing and the difference we make as chiropractors. And that I'm done. I sleep well at nights. I'm good. I get them, we're done. People get served, and you played a huge part in that. So thank you very much for all you've done and coming in. Now I just want to do one more thing. If it's okay, can I read you guys some research? Would that be okay? And everyone's like, oh my word, Ryan, stick to what you're good at, okay? Now, just bear with me. Here's some research I'd like to share with you. So, Heidi, we've been doing, throughout this event, we've been doing some work on happiness, and there's a lot of work by author by Sean Anker. I don't know if you've read any Sean Anker's work, and he talks something about the happiness advantage, and he also talks about how, as an interconnected group, when we do stuff, the sum total of the whole group outperforms individuals by country mile, right? So here's one of the studies. One of the studies is if you give $1, what's they found? If you give $1 to a person, that person moves to another department, the giving in that department goes up by 53%. Can we say that again? You give $1, right, to that person goes to another department, the giving goes up 53%. Then, if you give in front of strangers, everyone that witnessed the giving have a giving or donation that goes up by, or gratitude or whatever it is, but specifically giving goes up by 25%. You guys understand, yes? So the process starts, if we're going to have a collective, the process starts with us doing it so that we can have a better collective as a profession, as a nation. Does that make sense, yes? Now, I'll tell you one more thing, Heidi. I teach this concept in sales, and I say, from a congruency perspective, if you are not prepared to pay what you're asking your customers to pay for your service, you'll have a tough time in selling that thing, because guess what? It smells of incongruency. If you're not prepared to invest, now I'm speaking to the converted here, because they all invest, and they're all here, and they're investing time and money already. But if you're not prepared to invest in yourself or whatever, what you're asking other people to invest in you're going to have a very tough time. And from a health perspective, I always say to people, one of the quickest hacks to actually be able to serve more people and sell better, that's an important word, is actually just invest in yourself, because then you feel more congruent in doing the thing. Does it make sense to everyone on this call, yes? Does it make sense on this call? So what I'd like to suggest, and it's just a suggestion, Heidi, if you're okay with this, is how many you think that it would be a congruent thing for us to donate At some point, I'm not forcing you to do this, but if you're to donate at least an adjustment, like I'm not talking per month, I'm not talking per year, I'm saying just one adjustment ever. How many think that we should be at least freaking doing that? Right? Okay, now I'll take one step further. What if we said one adjustment per month, we should be donating to this type of stuff? How many think that if you're getting 300, 400 a week, how many think it's like a no-brainer to be at least doing that? Like, would you guys agree with me? You guys agree with me? Like, that's what happens, right? And from a giving perspective, I was once taught that if it doesn't feel a little uncomfortable, it'll challenge you, then in some way, shape, or form, like you need to be challenged a little bit more. So I'm not going to ask for anyone for commitment here, but in the future, towards the new study that Heidi's doing, how many of you would join me in donating and raising funds? If I create a little page, you can donate whatever you feel comfortable. But in my inner circle group, I want to donate something, I'll do something from Rieder, but I want to donate from Rieder in a circle from you guys. And if Heidi, if we can somehow like get everyone's name somewhere, something like that, that's what I'd like to do to create a firefly effect. If you're in and you're with me and you're able to give whatever you feel comfortable, give me some love on the screen. Okay, awesome. Woo, that's amazing, that's amazing, that's amazing, that's amazing. So I'll kick it off, and I'll say that I'll personally, my group, me personally, I'm going to donate $5,000 to your next study. Pretty cool, right? Awesome. So we're going to do a big check from Rieder Inner Circle, that we would love to donate a $5,000 check to you guys for your next study. But here's the thing. I need some support. How many of you are prepared? No, you don't have to match me. But if I'm prepared to give $5,000, how many are prepared to give a little bit, maybe $50 or something in time? You guys prepared to do that? Damn right, baby. And I love and appreciate you guys. Heidi, would that be okay?
I'd fucking love it.
Okay, awesome. On one condition that Heidi, you agree to come back one day and help us.
I'll be there.
Okay, let's go back.
I love you, you know that. Enjoy it.
Let's go back to the grid. Let's go back to the grid there. So, ladies and gentlemen, for the last time, I just want to say, Heidi, thank you so much. And I am going to hold you guys to that. I'm going to create a link, and then you choose what you want to donate. It's like in a little thing. Would that be okay? To my crew, my inner circle, would that be okay? You guys come as a team, because it's the firefly effect. It makes a difference to our industry, our profession, and also, guess what? It makes a difference to the people that watch you donate. It makes a difference to the people that you adjust in the morning by research, as I've shown you. So, last time, Heidi, we love and appreciate you. Give Heidi a huge round of applause. Awesome. Good job. So my team will create that page for you guys. If you want to donate, we'll send it out on Monday. Donate a little bit if you want, whatever you can. I appreciate that. Arlene, you're making me jealous with that glass of wine. And as they say, how many of you had an awesome day? Now, we're almost through the finish line. And they say that winners don't run to the line, they run through the line. So you guys up to play one more game with me? Would that be okay? If you've got your envelope, take your envelope out, or piece of pen and paper. If you do that, I'd appreciate that. So piece of paper, pen, and this is where the learning really happens. But I just want to ask you a question. I want you to just think for a second. We'll just play a little bit of music, and I want you to write. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to write a letter to yourself. We spoke about happiness this whole event, and we spoke about gratitude, and we spoke about the whole thing. We spoke about journey, but I want you to write a letter to yourself. And I want you to start the letter with, some of the things you've learned about yourself this weekend. Some of the stuff you learned about, the thing that you're engaged in, the place you are in your life, you as a person, the potential you have as a person. I want you to take your time now and write yourself a letter. Now, here's what's going to happen. At some point, that's all I'm going to do. Write the letter, and if you've got your envelope, wave your envelopes for me. I want you to write the letter. I'm giving you 3 to 5 minutes to write a letter to yourself that you're going to read in the future. And I want you to go with this basis. I want you to remind yourself of the feeling you have right now, the certainty you have right now, some of the lessons you had right now, the place you are right now. Spend a little bit of time right now just being introspective and go and write a letter to yourself about the person you are, the person you want to become, the things you want to achieve, and the belief you have in yourself. Because remember, you're not as good as you think you are much better. Giving you 3 to 5 minutes, write that letter, and then put it in an envelope and seal it, and that's all I want you to do now. 3 to 5 minutes, go.